Indie games. Most of us are just fans, gamers, or super gamers. But maybe one time you were curious, how a game made? Can an episode novice make them? Today I will go into how to make games, and I will be making a game with you throughout this series, where we'll discover the hardships and awesome things about it together, and in the end we'll release it on Steam. I'm simonhytte, and welcome to the Game Dev Spirit. When I was younger, all I wanted to do was to make games, and the first game I ever worked on was a side-scrolling RPG about the zombie apocalypse. I was writing the story, daydreaming and drawing pixel art. We were determined to make it, and after several months of development, it never came to be. I was stuck with this itch to try it again at some point. 2 years later, I joined a Discord server and tried it again. I found some people to make the game with. I started planning out the game. Again, I was doing art, started doing music, and I was talking to my friends about the characters, and I got myself lost in this beautiful world and kept creating, and the project ended up in a several months long hiatus in which people slowly abandoned it. I was so disappointed because I wished this would have worked. It kept failing and failing. I attempted once more an RPG with a twist, the twist being it never getting made. So what was I doing wrong? Was it the lack of skill holding me back? Was it the lack of determination?
Or was it the impending doom of our entire existence is just being ultimately
Well, no. While all of them except the last one may have played a role, the biggest influence was the lack of scope. Scope? I imagine you might be scratching your head right now. Scope is how high or low you're shooting, and how big or small your project is. The reason why most people, including my past self, have an issue with this is because it's very hard to know exactly when you're a beginner. As a beginner, it's very hard to know where exactly you have to shoot, because you don't know how long stuff takes. You don't know how long it takes to get a character from left to right on a screen, or to display a menu screen. You've never done those things. Think of it as painting. If someone asks you to paint them, what probably happens is that you start rendering every hair and crevice on their face and forget about the larger picture. With game development, you need to zoom out. You need a bird's eye view to see how big the project is. Making games is hard, and it's easy to forget that you're making that darn character move from left to right, left to right, left to right, and then they grunt and a little savouge that takes months to perfect. You may end up grunting more yourself than them in the end. So, game development is like being a bird. You eat worms. Wait. You look at things from above to see a larger picture. Every decision when making a game needs to be as confident as a strike of a samurai. You have to be certain 100% with no doubts, and that's why it's hard. If you make uncertain decisions about your game, it ends up being scattered without a clear goal or an idea. So, the moment I realized I'm not making a 3D realistic platformer, I'm not making an online MMORPG or something like Call of Duty, I'm not making the latest AAA games, and that's okay. Christ heavens, just look at how many people are working on these games. People see this as a limitation, but I think it's a strength. And it's kind of what makes the modern games beautiful. I recommend trying out the least complex, the simplest game you can think of. I'm not talking about your favorite indie game, by the way. That's too hard for many people at the start. Just start with something like Flappy Bird, that's fine. It needs to be simple. So all of this leads us back to Embers of SPIRITFLAME, the game I'm making. So it's a point and click game, so it isn't gonna be heavy on the gameplay as much. At first I wanted an environment that the player can walk in and interact for themselves. But when I was really thinking about it, I realized that this wouldn't really make much sense and wouldn't add that much compared to the work it takes. So here's some stuff you should know you need to have when you're walking, all of this stuff. So ultimately my decision came to one question: what's best for the game and the player? That's a question you will be asking yourself very often when making a game. My choice was to make it smaller scaled and point and click. The scope is super small, so it's going to be only a few levels and it's going to be only a couple of hours long. I generally dislike a lot of point and click games besides a few, so I'll tailor it to the ones I like to play. I enjoy a lot of detective games, more narrative driven in this genre, so that means not a ton of gameplay, so it's less code heavy. So for example, I'm not so good at coding, so the game being less focused on coding is probably better. Or you can also find someone who can fill in your weakness. So my friend, for example, is taking care of coding for this project. Games that would be inspiration for this game would be Outer Wilds, The Return of the Obra Dinn, and The Case of the Golden Monkey. I think it's this mysterious aura, something we can tap into and expand on it. One of my favorite series of all time is Gravity Falls, which has this like very rich atmosphere of secrets and mysterious things to it. And I think that's something I want to replicate for this game. It's helpful to go outside of games for inspiration as well. Hey, trust me. It may sound easy to write this shit down, but what you want to make and how, it takes a lot of time, personal reflection and feedback from others to know. A helpful thing you can borrow from screenwriting is a logline. A logline is a simple description of your project. They usually use it on scripts or stories or movies, but you can use it for games too, and people use it. It helps you understand what you're making because you have to describe it in a sentence. It helps others understand what you're doing because you can easily describe it to them, and you can find examples of them usually here on the Steam page, under the picture here. Just to be clear, this isn't about selling your game, it's about the ease of understanding the game for you and others. Usually people will relate your game to, oh, this is like a Zelda game, or this is like a Mario game, or people need something they can latch on to understand it, because they can't play it for themselves from just the description. You may change it a bit down the road, but you should know at core what the game is about. Once you start building, you can change it. It's very important for this to be decided very well. Back in the caveman days of Nintendo Entertainment System and Atari consoles, they used to have this stuff on the back of the box, but you still had no idea what you were buying because it didn't show any gameplay footage anywhere. So you bought an exciting game like Plague Attack and it ended up looking like ass. Game development, in my opinion, boils down to these main aspects. It's the gameplay, how the game feels to play and how the player interacts with it. The level design, how the levels are laid down and why. Are they stupid? Are they this stupid like this jump in Psychonauts? Programming, the brain of the game where the logic is. Character art guides the player or even are the player sometimes. Background art builds up the story atmosphere and helps you indulge you in the game a bit more. Makes it feel more real. Story serves to build on the gameplay and tell an engaging story. The music. My beloved. It builds up atmosphere and expands on the game in ways I can't even begin to describe. Sound effects, or SFX for short, are sounds in the game including footsteps, gunshots, barks, and more. UI UX, game menus, HUD, tutorial windows, pop-ups and more. I'll dive into all of these subjects later in this series, just remember these simple things. You don't need to do these alone. You don't need to be a professional in either to make a great game. You can focus your game on some of them more than the others if you're confident in it. Now that we know what the game is going to be about, we can expand on this stuff a bit more. I like old houses. When I was younger, I was kind of always like dredging about them, seeing them from afar. I always get a bit spooked when I'm there, but I'm also intrigued. My idea is that the game is basically in this old abandoned house, and you would try to find something, or someone maybe, that could be fun. I tried both of these, and I ended up liking the missing person vibe a bit more, so that's what I went with. I've looked into some visual inspiration on Pinterest, but I have something in mind. My other kind of like fascination is Victorian architecture. I think it's like, ever since I made my first video, like the last day incident, it fits the horror atmosphere, I suppose. So the goal with this is to craft some setting that feels unique and tells a story and stands out somehow. So I need a house for this that would feel like a character itself. I started thinking about a larger picture and sketch out the building. Later we will expand on these ideas and craft a bit some more, but for now this should be very basic. Of course I'll talk about the game engine and how technically the game is going to be made in a video later, so keep in touch and hit the notification ding dong. I was talking about the game development being happy and gloomy and fun, which it also is, but there is something bigger you're fighting when you're making games. It's not any boss, it's in fact you. I can't even begin to describe the nights you will be in your room, trying and failing, and as your hands cover your face in regret, you crack it. It's done. You've realized that it's just the beginning though. It's a small, minor problem you encountered, and there's like hundreds of other problems you need to account for. You're running a marathon and not a sprint. That's okay. And I'm sure whatever you're making is worth pushing through and finishing, whatever it takes. Be mindful though of not overworking yourself. That isn't gonna help anything, and you're just gonna end up demotivated coming back to the project. At the end of the day, the reason why anyone makes games is fun, and the process itself can be as rewarding as the game itself in the end. So I hope this series is gonna help some of you in some ways, and yeah. Thank you for watching. Drop a like or share the video, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm making a detective point-and-click game about mysteries of this old house. I've been simonhytte, and you keep barking at the right trees. Woof, woof. The reason why most people, including my past self, have an issue with this. What is this? I sound like a snake